How is it going, everybody? Something we talk about a lot in this show is building yourself an arsenal of tools that help you get through your day to day, to slowly build towards your goals. Whether your goals are being healthy, being happy, avoiding things that upset you or derail you. And it's probably obvious at this stage that I think being able to have daily practices that you plan and do regularly is a great way to help you feel like you're in control of what's going on in your life. My guest today in the Prymal podcast is Colin Mc Donnell. Now, I've known Colin for years, and every time we chat, it always leaves me buzzing because he's very open-minded and has great knowledge surrounding health, wellness, and life in general. But Colin is also a Somatics Instructor and Practitioner. If you've never heard of Somatics, it's essentially a movement practice that teaches you to understand the connections between your brain and your body. And through education of movement patterns and self-assessment, it can be used to manage pain, improve mobility, enhance performance, and there's loads of other benefits. Sorry if I'm butchering this, Colin. I asked Colin to join me on this episode to teach us a little bit about somatics. I've been working with him for a few years to resolve several issues I have myself, but also because he's just an interesting dude who speaks really well when it comes to understanding the things that are actually important in life. Taking care of yourself physically and mentally, and creating environments and making decisions for yourself that actually make you happy. Whenever we get together, it's never just a 5-minute chat, but it's definitely worth listening to this one. I hope you enjoy it, guys. Welcome to our shared journey to find the answers to questions about health, wellness, nutrition, performance, life and success, and to craft the most resilient, hardy and happy humans you've ever seen. Welcome to the Prymal podcast. Okay, welcome back to the Prymal podcast. I'm here today with Colin Mc Donnell. Colin, thanks very much for joining me.
No problem, Danny. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Colin, we have a bit of history together, so
we do.
Full exposure, full context. We go back a while. So I wanted you to come on this podcast for a very specific reason. Is we've had many conversations before, and every single time we do, I was thinking back about when I was starting the podcast, the kind of people I wanted to talk about. Every time we had a conversation, we would always, not that we were touching on really deep topics, but I'd always come away feeling refreshed or buzzing, or I'd have a really, really good positive feeling coming away. And you know yourself, there's people when you speak to them and you have conversations, you feel like that. And that's the whole purpose for me with this podcast. So having you on was very, very important for me for that reason. But also, people know my background in physical health and wellness. You're actually a somatics practitioner and an instructor now as well. So from that point of view, you fit the mold very, very well. So here we are. The podcast has finally happened. So I appreciate you being here and appreciate you agreeing to come and tell your story and share your information with us. So just to get us started, and I usually ask people to give a bit of an introduction, let's just stick with the somatics thing first, the somatic side of things. Sure. Could you please, because I know somatics is not, I don't hate using the word mainstream, but people are very familiar with physiotherapy, for example, and they're very familiar with personal training and things like that. These are the kind of the popular buzzwords. But somatics is one that I had to learn about when I was in the industry from you. You introduced me to somatics, and then we obviously did a few classes and a few sessions together, and I found it massively useful. And I come from what could be classed as a skeptical background in physiotherapy and medicine of all this kind of stuff, and I found it, like, personally for me in a professional and a personal athletic, I suppose, capacity, very, very helpful. So I was converted immediately, not just because we were friends, but could you give us a bit of context on somatics? What is somatics? What got you into it? And your background with this kind of movement science, I suppose.
So I had some sort of long-standing problems that I wasn't getting a resolution from the traditional avenues, let's say. So when I was in my late teens, I think when I was around 17 maybe, I was doing Chinese boxing, kung fu, that sort of thing. Okay. Loved it. Not because I was into beating people around like that, stupid like that, but I just loved the movement element, spinning and kicking and rolling and all that stuff. It was fun, so I liked doing that. But anyway, I picked up a groin injury, and once I got that groin injury, everything kind of went downhill. Pain in my back, pain in my hip. And I'm still a very young guy, so I didn't understand really what was going on. And all of the things we did to get to that point of sort of mobility stopped working, right? So I knew there was something wrong. Yeah. So anyway, fast forward a few years, I'm sort of in my 20s, I'm still having this it's like, it's not debilitating me, but it's always there in the background, this pain. I'm sure loads of people have had experiences like this where you've got this niggly pain, it won't go away. And not only is it not going away, but it seems to be kind of spreading or getting a little bit worse.
Yeah.
And it's just infringing on your ability to do things you want to do. So I did all the usual stuff. I sort of went to massage, went to physiotherapy. I tried acupuncture, TENS, you name it. Like, I was trying, and I was trying all the things that were available to me at the time. And at that stage, you're talking the early 2000s in Dublin, there was probably less stuff around maybe available than there was now, or than there is now. So as I said, not having any joy, but always thinking to myself, there's something wrong here. How come I can't, like, how can this be carrying on like this?
Yeah.
So I was in 2003, I went on one of the working holiday visas to Australia, like everybody did. And while I was there, I was working in a design studio because, I come from a graphic design background as well. I went to art college and ended up doing graphic design. So I was doing some freelance work in a studio over there. And every Tuesday, the boss's brother used to come in and he'd do sort of acupressure shiatsu in the chair with everyone. And I was like, oh my God, this is brilliant.
Yeah.
It felt, because you're working at a computer all day.
Shiatsu is like the massage, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of pressure point
Pressure
massage.
point massage, yeah.
And every Tuesday, the guy comes in, he'd do a bit of work on us. And I was like, oh, I love this. I used to love Tuesdays, The guy comes in and he'd do your shoulders and that, and then you'd go back to work. So that kind of opened my eyes that there was other stuff out there, Actually, do you know what? I don't think I really started looking into these things until after that point. So the massage and stuff, I think as a young kid, I just sort of sucked it up. And it was after being in Australia, when I came home then, I was, again, working in a design studio in town, and I kind of knew I didn't want to be doing graphic design forever. Nothing wrong with it. It's a good job, and it was useful skills to have and met good people. But I didn't really particularly want to have to do it going forward long term. So I started looking into massage. Okay, so I'll go and learn massage. A, because I was interested, and B, I thought in the course of this training, I'll probably be able to resolve my issue. Done massage, no joy, right? Learned loads, but no joy. Sports injury therapy, same thing. And that was a couple of years later. That wasn't sort of 4 years after that. I said, okay, I'm going to do sports injury therapy now. Same thing. Over the course of this, I'll get my problem will resolve. But it didn't, right? And I was going, something doesn't compute here. Like, how do I have to keep going to someone to get some relief from the pain I'm experiencing?
And what were these people telling you? Were they diagnosing? Were they giving you an actual, this is what you have? Or
well, people would say things like, you have a groin strain, or you're very tight here. And it's like, well, I know. I'm living in it,
Yeah.
So what do I do with it? And I never heard it. And first of all, let me say, like, everyone, great people, very knowledgeable and well-intentioned, and gave me the best teaching that I could get from where they were coming from, But I always, as I said, I just always felt it's like I'd be going to get me hip released every couple of weeks, and it was driving me nuts. I was going, this is ridiculous. What's going on here? So shortly after that, I went and done a working holiday visit to New Zealand. As you can see, I just like to be moving around.
Yeah.
Went to New Zealand, and so when I'm in New Zealand, I'm like, oh, what have they got here? So I went and done a thing called Heller work, which is similar to Rolfing. They're very much in the same wheelhouse. What they do on that is they work at manipulating the fascia to improve your movement and improve pain.
Yeah.
Basically, they're saying, like, if the fascia is all bunched up, or if it's not sort of pulled into the wrong place, it'll distort your movement.
Okay, yeah.
So when I was as I said, was in New Zealand, I went to a guy for that, and I experienced a fairly profound release in my hip when he worked with me. So I was like, oh, okay, now this is different. But again, it didn't stick. Okay, so there's still, I was like, okay, there's something else going on here. So eventually I ended up back home. So this is about 10 years ago probably. And I was on the blog post of Dan John.
Yeah.
Most of your listeners are probably familiar with Dan John. And he was reviewing a book called Move Without Pain by Martha Peterson. And he was saying how, oh, this is great. Basically giving it a glowing review. Said, practice these movements, because I think Dan John has had his own hip surgeries and things. And he said, this book really helped. So I was like, oh, what's this? So Google Martha Peterson, started reading her website. And obviously it was somatics. That's what she was teaching. And I was reading the background, and it starts talking about the brain and how the brain is the culprit, if you like, in when you have this chronic muscle tension, this chronic muscle pain. So like, okay, this is something different to what I've been getting told previously. Makes sense as well. Brain controls the muscles. The muscles aren't doing what you want. The problem's upstream, Yeah. Okay, grand. So Google Somatics Dublin, see who's around. And I found a girl called Tanya Fitzpatrick. And she was in the city centre, so ring her up, book a session. Yeah, she says, no problem, come on in. First session, I learned 3 movements, I think. And I came out of that place. I was like, what the hell just happened? Me back. I had a goose egg in me back for years that just wouldn't go away. And it was gone.
Like it's a physical knot you could feel.
Oh, yeah, you could put your hand on it. I think
Okay.
I didn't even know, I was like, what? Okay, I knew it was tense, but what do you do to get rid of that? Anyway, so literally 3 movements later, walking out, and like, it wasn't just me pain it gone. I says, I feel like I did about 10 years ago. I'm walking down I was going to the bus stop around Marion Square. I was like, oh my God, my back felt like butter.
Okay.
Just completely relaxed. And not only that, I was like, I can do these movements at home now. So I was going back for a couple of weeks to learn a bit more, but that first week, go home every night, get on the floor, do these couple of movements. And I was like, not only did it keep the pain away, it improved. My movement was good. I was like completely able to move better. No pain in my back.
And were you still training or fighting or competing or anything like that at the time?
I would have been when I was training down the gym with you guys.
Oh, okay. So you were training pretty hard.
Yeah, I was training pretty hard,
gym,
but there was a massive jump then in my ability to do things like squat.
Okay.
And get into position for deadlifts and things like that.
Yeah,
It was like, there was no more aches and niggles. It was like, oh my God, I feel amazing.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, now I can push my training a bit harder because I feel a bit better. So anyway, I knew then I was like, I have to learn as much as I can about this as possible. So I got in touch with Martha Peterson. I was sort of emailing her back and forth, just asking questions and stuff, because I was still like, me saws, not understanding fully the implications of what I was learning. That it's not just one muscle; it's never just one muscle. And can you recommend a movement for your psoas and all the rest? But I started asking her, like, I said, I want to learn how to do this. I want to learn how to teach these movements. And she had actually been getting asked the same question by 2 other people. So we were basically all harassing her to teach us how to do this. And eventually she relented, and we went to the UK and we had a train there. She's American. So we were the first people that she actually trained up. And it was funny, one of the girls was from Norway. It was like a bad joke. It's like a Slovenian, a Norwegian and an Irishman. Yeah. But one of the girls came, and I had learned along the way that not only is there the movements, there's a hands-on element to the work that you can do as well. So one of the Norwegian girl arrived, and she didn't even know there was hands-on. She was like, oh, there's hands-on? I thought we were just going to learn the movements. But anyway, so 3 years, 3 of us learned all the stuff, all the material, and been doing it ever since, basically. Finished up around 2015. Been doing it since, but I knew my own practice since about 2010 or 11, as in my own movement practice for myself.
Okay.
And yeah, it was the only thing I found that made sense. It was the only thing I found that actually had a lasting benefit. And it gives you all the information to understand why these things are happening. And then, of course, once you have an understanding of what's going on, it's a hell of a lot easier to start addressing the problem.
Why is it that something obviously that was very profound for you, and I mean I've gone through the practice as well, and I use it as part of my own I suppose self-care therapy. Why did it not exist, I suppose, in Europe or Ireland? Why did people not hear about it? Like, I was in the injury management industry, and I never heard about somatics before in my life. And you're kind of taught, now again, I say a lot of this kind of stuff, no disrespect to anybody or any field, but you're taught a very linear kind of, something happens and the answer is A, you have a tear or you have a break or there's something physical. Right. You're never really kind of taught that maybe there's you learn about biomechanics and functional movement, but you're never really taught that maybe there's an amnesia in the muscle, as you sometimes tell me, or a chronic tightness that's coming from not the muscle but the brains. You don't have to just target the muscle and strengthen, whatever. There's actually another way of doing this. There's a release way. Why was that not a concept that was more well known, I suppose? That's
a great question. I think one of the big reasons is they kind of exist in different spheres. Like, you've got the traditional model, and then you've got these kind of somatic models. The other reason is Hanna, the guy Thomas Hanna, in 1990 he started teaching people how to do it, how to do his work, Hanna Somatics. And so he had a big class, 38 people, and it was meant to go on for a couple of years. But in the middle of the very first sort of 7-week block at whatever it was, he actually died in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
So you had all these people who weren't quite fully trained, and their teacher he's gone.
Yeah.
So they had to rely on notes, and I think that kind of left it in limbo a little bit, because I think if he hadn't died, it probably would have been more in the consciousness. It would have been more mainstream earlier. So I think that's one reason. But I think the main reason is just because these things exist in as I said, different spheres.
Yeah.
You know, physiotherapy and massage and all these things, they kind of more exist in the medical model.
Okay, yeah.
And this is coming more from an experiential model, if you like.
Okay, I get you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that was one of my first things I asked myself when I came out of that place. I was like,
Where was this?
Where was this? Yeah. Why doesn't everybody know about this? Like, this works really well. So yeah, I think that's probably the main reasons.
Okay.
But there is a whole, like, it's actually a huge sphere. Like, you've got Feldenkrais. Will I talk about Feldenkrais for a second?
100%.
Okay, so I'll pan back a bit actually to somatics, sort of the history. There's a guy called the Alexander Technique. I think a lot of people have heard of. Okay, so Alexander Technique was a guy called FM Alexander, Tasmanian guy, and he was an orator. He was an actor. He did a lot of, you know, sort of Shakespearean stuff, you know. And he started to realise that his voice was waning, and he couldn't control his voice for the duration of what he was doing, basically, and that the quality was reducing. So he started investigating what was going on, and he discovered, like, his head position would change how his voice sounded. And you can check that by yourself easily by making a sustained noise out of your mouth and moving your head back and forth and round. You'll hear it change. Okay, so it's very easy to verify this for yourself. So he set up mirrors, and he started trying to figure out what he was doing that was making his voice deteriorate. And through that process of learning, self-learning and observing, he was able to improve his voice and be able to continue doing what he was doing. So that led on to the Alexander Technique, and it was, you know, obviously it expanded on from that into the spine and everything else. Then you have someone else called Moshe Feldenkrais, who developed what's called the Feldenkrais method. And I think I was telling you a bit about Feldenkrais the other day, but I'll sort of repeat this. He's real interesting character, Israeli physicist, first European to open a judo school in Europe. So he was a black belt in judo. He's a very good judoka, and also was involved in the development of radar technology.
Such a random crossover.
I know, right? Yeah. But funnily enough, something he learned in judo helped him to develop what's called the Feldenkrais method. So in judo, obviously, you're using your attacker's energy or momentum against them. So as they're going one way, you go with them, and you can throw them. So he applied this sort of notion, if you like, or that idea to muscles. So if the muscle is tight, bring the two ends of the muscle together passively, the muscle will relax. Okay. Now, you've probably heard of that's positional release. Yeah, and we call it kinetic mirroring. It's the same thing. So that was his contribution, and he had a whole series of awareness through movements explorations. So again, this is floor work. He had his own knee problems, which he solved himself by getting on the floor and basically just exploring movements and figuring out how to move better. Okay. So again, a self-learning experience. He had the same similar story. He wasn't getting satisfaction going to doctors and stuff. They weren't able to tell him about his knee. So he says, all right, I'm going to figure this out for myself. Clearly a very smart guy, and was able to do that. Now, Feldenkrais, Hanna brought Feldenkrais to America for his first trip to America.
Okay.
Prior to meeting Feldenkrais, Hanna had actually been, as I said, he was a philosopher. He had been a head of the philosophy department, I think, in Florida or somewhere. And while he was there, he had studied neurology, because there was a neurology course in the university. So after that, he discovers Feldenkrais. He's seen Feldenkrais do work with a kid who had like cerebral palsy or something, and his breathing was really compromised. And just through applying pressure in different areas and helping the kid sense what was going on, the kid was able to improve his breathing. So Hanna saw this and was completely blown away by this. And as I said, decided he wanted to learn Feldenkrais. So he brought Feldenkrais to the States, done the training himself, and because of his background, had all the neuro end of things.
Yeah.
He was able to join a lot of dots that had been, I don't want to say they'd been missed, but hadn't been considered maybe.
Okay.
Prior to that. So then he goes off and starts developing his own. So he was doing the work of Feldenkrais, as in the functional integration is what it's called. And as he was working year after year, he starts recognizing all these things that are happening, and he starts being able to link them back to what's going on in the brain.
Okay.
So lo and behold, then you have somatics.
Yeah.
And I suppose we can get into now what it was that he was discovering.
Yeah, because I think to maybe condense it for people who are still kind of wondering what this movement practice is. When people hear movement practice, they might think like yoga is a movement practice. Sure, weightlifting is a movement. Running is a movement practice.
Yeah.
But what I like about somatics specifically, and what you've explained to me, is it's more about learning your own body, really. Because the first thing you ever did with me was you told me to walk up and down and tell you how I felt. And I was like, I don't know. And I was an athletic therapist, and I was trained to analyze people's biomechanics and movements and stuff like that. And you were saying, what do you feel? And I was like, I don't know. So your whole thing was with me was, right, let's figure out what are you feeling and identify the areas that might be sore or tight or not feel right. And we didn't have to put words on it. And then let's see what we can do in those areas so you can then self-release or I suppose, treat, if you want to call it that. But in terms of somatics, what exactly is it that we're trying to do here? Because I know there is a scientific element to this, definitely, with the link between the brain.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll go into pandiculations and stuff like that in a minute as well. So this is not just. Now, again, I like this kind of stuff, so I'm not ripping on this kind of stuff, but go out in the trees and move around and you're going to feel better. There is a method to this, and it is a practice, and it is a yoga in its own right, I suppose. We're not comparing it to yoga, but it is an actual practice, a movement practice, but there's a therapy side to this as well. How does it work? What does the package look like? Or what is Hanna obviously managed to take all these concepts and put them into a package or an offering. He was able to educate people on the methods.
Yeah, he was able to codify it a bit.
Okay,
so it's the realization that it's the brain that's dictating what's going on, basically. And the recognizing that people turn up with very predictable sort of patterns of stress.
Okay.
And the stress is expressed through muscular tension. Because essentially all we have is muscular tension, right? And there's a great TED talk by a guy called Daniel Walport, I think. And it's about why do we have a brain? And the upshot of it is the only reason you have a brain is so you can move. Your brain's there to organize movement, okay? Movement, muscles.
Yeah.
You can see where we're going with this. So Hanna started to recognize that there was these reflexes that people were showing up with. And they're easily recognizable and very predictable. One is he called green light reflex, right? That's just a kind of a cute name for it. It's really the Landau response.
Yeah.
You're familiar with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so for people who are listening who maybe aren't familiar with that, the Landau response is something that occurs when kids are about 5 months old and they start to realize that they can extend their spine, essentially. And it's part of learning how to walk or crawl and all that stuff. But it doesn't go away. It's still there in the brain, and it's a reflex of moving forward out into the world. So if you're in a very busy job, for example, you're constantly triggering your back muscles. That's why work stress is strongly correlated with low back pain.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so you start to see these little dots getting joined up now. There's also another reflex called the startle reflex, which he called the red light reflex. It's the same thing. And the startle reflex is like a withdrawal response. And again, it's very easy everyone's familiar with it. If you've ever been standing somewhere and there was a loud bang, that's the startle reflex. Yeah. So it's more, as I said, a reflex of withdrawal, fear, anxiety. So you can start to see these things in people, right? But they're basically the opposite of each other. One is about moving out into the world. One is about withdrawing away from the world. So one's, I say positive, they're joyous, and the other one's negative and fear-based, if you like. So now you're starting to go, this isn't just a physical act. It's a whole emotional and like there's more to it than it just being about the muscles. This is about how you behave in the world, and how you deal with the world as well. So there was those. So you've got the front and the back. So now if someone comes in, it's like Landau reflex is all about the back, essentially. So when someone comes in and my back is sore, it's super tight, I keep having back pain, I can't do anything with it, and I can't relax. You go, okay, this person looks like they're going to have habituated Landau reflex. By habituated, I mean those back muscles are on all the time. So there's this constant output from the lower brain, the subcortex, to contract those back muscles. For whatever reason, it just depends on what their history is, what's going on in their life. A lot of the time it is work stress, And then the flip side of that, you've got someone who's maybe maybe has an anxious type of personality, or is involved in, something happened in their life that was fearful or scary, and so that's a flexor. So then you're just into the front of the body. So suddenly it's all starting to get a bit easier to digest. You've got the back, you've got the front. Okay. Now you can have a position where both sides are tight, which he called dark voice, and that's going to be an interesting one because you can have someone who's really tall posture, but they're rock hard. So the posture is being maintained by a lot of tension.
Okay.
As opposed to posture being maintained by a lack of tension, and it's just being relaxed.
Yeah.
So that startle reflex, that's quite insidious, okay? Because once they're tight in the front, chest, belly, all of that, adductors in the legs, all the flexors basically. You can see I'm going into it here.
It's like the fetal position, kind of
like the fetal position, exactly. So, but if you habituate that reflex, that affects digestion, that affects your breathing, that affects your neck, your jaw, all of these things, because it draws you into that curl. So it's very hard to go about your day when you're pulled forward like that. So again, when people come in, this is what you're looking for. And it's not about posture, because people, oh, your posture's good or bad. Like if I'm looking at someone, I am assessing their posture, but it's not to say that's strong and that's weak. I'm looking at your posture so I can get a bead on what's happening in your nervous system. Okay, this person's getting pulled forward. They have a degree of red light reflex. So we need to teach them how to go into that and then come out of it again. So that's the upshot of it. It's like, so I'm looking at them with a view of not what can they fix, but what does this person need to learn? What does this person need to become aware of in themselves so that they can be in control of it? Whether it's the front or the back. And now there's another reflex which he called the trauma reflex, and I think nowadays it's probably not a great name for it. It should probably be called more the injury reflex, because trauma is such a loaded term now.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, because it has nothing actually to do with emotional trauma per se. It's more like your plate guy, bang, you take a hit.
Yeah.
Like
it's acute, like
it's acute, but it ends up being sustained.
Okay.
Because so say you have a shock to the system, that contraction gets sort of locked into the nervous system, so you don't come out of it.
Yeah.
And that'll create so that's basically talking about the sides of the body. Because if you notice, whenever there's a collision, you'll tend to turn to your side. No one goes into a collision face first.
The front or the back,
front or the back. You'll tend to turn. So boom, you get locked into that twist. So then you end up with an asymmetry maybe in the waist, in the hips, generally in the trunk. And if one side of your waist is tight, it's going to draw one hip up. So now when you're walking, your gait is off.
Okay.
And so then if you start to load that by whether it's running or weight training or whatever, if you're kind of sedentary and maybe only walking, you might notice it might make that much difference. But if you do have to do something that involves maybe loading that pattern, eventually you're going to hit a problem because you're off balance. Okay, and actually you see that a lot of time people say, oh, leg length discrepancy, and usually it's like a true leg length skeletal is pretty rare.
It's quite rare,
yeah. A lot of the time it's the waist is hiked on one side, and once you release the waist, that magically the legs come back to the same length,
Yeah.
So that's the other reflex. So when people are coming in, that's what you're looking for. I'm looking, okay, how much of these three reflexes is present?
Yeah.
And based on that, what do I need to teach them?
Okay.
So it's framed differently. And then, of course, so there's a hands-on element to that. But the most important part is I teach them then how to do it for themselves. Whatever I do with them, I send them home with, okay, so we've worked with your back, let's say. I'm going to send you home with 2, maybe 3, depending on how much brain space you have on the day, movements that you can do at home to not only maintain, but to continue to improve and to regain control of these muscles. Because once you can control the muscles, they're not going to give you any hassle, right?
Yeah.
You're able to contract them, you're able to relax them. They're completely under your control. Doesn't mean, I'm not going to say, okay, you're never going to have pain. Maybe you have a particularly stressful day in work. Your back is going to act up or going to get tight. No problem. Get on the floor, do your arch and flatten, 5 minutes. You'll be able to reduce that tension again.
Yeah.
And get back to that sort of nice baseline of being reasonably relaxed all the time. Or very relaxed, depending on how deep you want to go into it or how good you want to get at it.
Okay.
Did I answer that question?
You did, yeah. No, and this is really it's a great way of illustrating it, because this is where I really started to click with you and where the conversation started to come from, because it really fits with this functional, and I use this in inverted commas model that I'm always big on. And I said before, like when I finished college and I was treating with the tradition, I want to call it the physio model, I got very frustrated because you're dealing with people who come in, and a lot of people I saw, okay, you have the acute model with athletes. That was one side of what I did, and that's kind of it's the trauma, I suppose, quote unquote reflex you were talking about there. But most people that I saw in the clinic were chronic pain patients, chronic back, chronic shoulder, chronic neck, and I didn't know why, but I knew it wasn't just because they're sitting in a chair all day. So I knew it was a lot more than that. And what I started to do in a lot of my sessions was talking to people, and you'd find out there's way more going on in their lives. And I was like, I wonder, is that what's actually causing the problems here, rather than just I sit in a weird chair or I pick the baby up or whatever it was. And when you started saying to me it's about recognizing this bigger picture about what's going on, I was like, yeah, that's kind of what was in my head. And the functional medicine stuff I was getting into at the time as well, it's the same kind of thing. It's rather than popping a pill for this particular symptom that you have, let's step back and look at the big picture and then teach you how to manage all these different things that are going on. And it's with somatics, I like the fact that it's quite simple with not that it's a simple practice, but red light, green light, or a combination of both, or acute trauma. It's not, right, we've got your lat muscle here or one of your intercostals and we're going to have to work this out now. And because for years and years being involved in sport, you see guys and they're carrying the same sort of injury or having injuries in the same areas over and over and over. And I was one of these guys as well, and I still am one of these guys, but over and over and over again. and they're going to the physio, or they're going to the doctor, they're going to A, B, C, D. And you said this at the very start, all fantastic people in their own right and very, very knowledgeable people in their own right. But for me, I'm always thinking, like, there has to be a bigger picture here, because you've been going back over and over and over and over and over again. And yeah, you might get through 4 or 5 weeks with no issues, but it's not resolving. That's a problem. You talked about your groin injury at the start. It wasn't resolving. That's a problem. Like, you can't just live with that forever, just go and getting treatment all the time. Number one, it costs money to go and get treatment all the time. Number two, if it's not working and you have to keep doing it, that's, I mean, the definition of madness. Do the same thing over and over again, expect different results. So that's where it really started to click with me, because it was tapping into this whole, and I'm going to keep calling it the functional model, but it's this bigger picture model of, here's a problem, let's just not focus 100% on the problem, let's focus on the circumstances surrounding the problem. And then when I went in and I joined in a couple of the classes, first of all with you, and then had a couple of individual sessions with Somatics, it really cemented in my head. It made a lot of sense, because we chatted about this the other day, and it was Meredith. She's a personal trainer and a fitness coach and a nutritionist that I know. She was, I was in a yoga class with Meredith, and she was telling me, she made a very good statement. I'm a GAA player, and I spent my entire career, even though I was in the physical health industry, ignoring what my body was telling me, because if I had an injury, I couldn't play. And most athletes are like that. They tend to ignore the injuries because an injury is going to stop you doing what you want to do. So you just ignore it and hope it goes away. And a lot of the time it doesn't. Sometimes it doesn't. You just ignore it. Whereas what you started to train me to do, and what Meredith I was able to link up the pieces in my head, was you actually have to do the opposite. You have to start paying a lot more attention. And as soon as you do, you realise, oh, hold on, there's certain things I can do here, there's ways I can move, and there's little bits I can do that can actually self-correct. And then, have you ever heard of Dr. Kelly Starrett, yeah, becoming a super leopard? He kind of said the same thing. He was doing, I think he's a physical therapy background. Is he doctor of physical therapy?
Yeah, I think so.
And he has this movement pattern method, but he'd be doing, say, a shoulder movement. But he was like, just find the bit that's sticky. And it's like, they didn't teach me that in college. Like, they were like a 47-degree angle, and you have to have the scapula pointed exactly this direction. And I was like, that used to blow my mind. I was like, oh, I don't want to have to think about all these numbers. Maybe it was a lazy thing. But then Dr. Kelly Starrett was like, no, just find the bit that's sticky. You'll know it yourself when you feel it. Feel for that area that doesn't feel quite right, and work through that area there. So when I came to you and started doing the somatics, that all started to kind of connect for me. And you were able to put words on the stuff that I was feeling. And we did both. We did the self movement, so you taught me how to move, and then there's the hands-on side of things as well. So yeah, that's what really appealed to me. That's why I really like somatics as well. That's why I wanted to have you come on here as well to give us a bit of the background, which you've done very concisely there, which is brilliant.
So one thing I want to actually, based on just what you were talking about there, is something that we pay close attention to with somatics is we're mostly looking at the trunk, okay, the trunk and spine, which I kind of missed out as I was talking earlier on. So when you're looking at those reflexes, they're more prevalent in the trunk, because that's where all the movement, or they're the first part of the body where impulses are going to reach out, coming out of the brain, right? So when someone comes in with a peripheral problem, you still speak to it, but you're still going to be looking at that trunk, okay? Because if someone's, so say for a red light, as I said to you, actually said earlier, if you're folded forward, that's going to affect your shoulders, it's going to affect your elbows and hands, it's going to affect your knees because you're in adduction in your legs and everything else.
Yeah.
If you're in extension, if you're in green light and it's in your back, that's going to affect your shoulders as well. It's going to affect your neck. It's going to affect your hips. You tend to have externally rotated hips. There's all these things. But if you address the center, if you get the center to chill out, the peripheral stuff will tend to resolve. You might need to do a little bit of extra work just to clean it up. But generally, you address the trunk, everything else works better.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And that's why a lot of the movements, you've done the movements focus mostly on trunk movements.
On trunk movements, yeah.
Spinal extension, spinal flexion, lateral flexion, extension, and rotation.
Yeah.
And that's a much easier thing to have to deal with then, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so just to kind of, I come into you.
Yeah.
I have pain, and usually, because I remember reading, when you first told me about somatics, I remember reading some of the testimonials and stuff like that, and it always seemed to be people had been to the doctor and the physio and and I eventually came in and had chronic pain. Nobody could diagnose it, and then I started moving and my pain went away. And I read so many of these testimonials. I was like, I wonder, are they like, is it people just going in writing this stuff down? But then I did it and I understood there's a real method here. It's not just come in and we'll get rid of your pain. There actually is a real method behind the process here. So I come in, I have chronic pain. You're looking for the bigger picture, green light, red light, trauma, what's going on. And even if it's not a specifically diagnosed, you have a supraspinatus tear or whatever, because there is a place for medicine and for physio and all of this kind of stuff as well. Yeah. And there are disciplines that can help specifically with issues like that. But for things, I think chronic pain is a really good one for in terms of talking about somatics.
Yeah.
Usually there is some sort of long-term, undiagnosed, unrecognized issue there, and it could just be a stress issue, or it could be a physical issue, or it could be an injury issue, it could be anything, but it kind of doesn't matter. It does matter, but it kind of doesn't matter if you can look at the bigger picture and say, well, if we correct your movement or correct your tension, so you'll analyze this person and we'll have a shoulder issue, for example. I had a bit of a shoulder thing. And it's mostly, people hear hands-on, they think massage, they think manipulation and stuff like that. It's not even that. It's kind of like guided movement. Because there was some movements at the start I wasn't able to. Now, again, I played sport all my life and was in the industry and couldn't actually. You were like, okay, I want you to move this particular way. I was like, how do I do that? And you'd guide the movement, you'd resist it, and then I'd learn it, and my brain would be like, that's how you do it. And then that's my knowledge. Then I own that knowledge. And the other thing I noticed was most people were saying, yeah, I went once or twice and then I never had to go again. Because the traditional model when you go to therapists and is you go and, okay, we go 10 sessions and see how we go. We go 20 sessions. I've been going for 10 years or whatever. I'm going to need therapy forever. But it tended to be, most people were saying 2 or 3 sessions. Not that it's a miracle fix for everything, but 2 or 3 sessions, people were feeling really good. And the key was they were educated and were able to continue their practice themselves.
100%. And that's really important because you sort of said something earlier on about therapy. Now, because somatics isn't therapy at all. It's education.
Yeah.
As I said to you, when people come in, I'm trying to, what did this person need to learn? And I said, that reframes your whole method, the whole way you look at it. People come in, figure out what they need to learn, teach it to them so that they can do it themselves. And then that's why, because people do sometimes come back, but it's if people do the exercises, if they take what they learned and apply it, obviously it's much better outcomes because they basically take on the responsibility of doing the learning for themselves as opposed to me teaching them. So if you can't bend over to put down your shoe or to put on your shoes, that's a problem, you know. So you need to, you're not optimizing then. You need to normalize your back function so that you can do something simple like that. Yeah. There's no point being able to pull 500 pounds if you can't put on your pants.
Fair, yeah.
You know? So a lot of the time people are trying to do things that are beyond their capabilities because they haven't learned how to do the basic things first.
Yeah.
Okay. And the basic things being kind of what we alluded to earlier on, whereas, you know, being able to move your spine in all the different directions that it needs to be able to go.
Yeah, like this is going to be the second part of our conversation here now because we've covered somatics really well there. But you used this phrase with me before, normalize instead of optimize. I said this before, there's a couple of catchphrases like on it, the company in the States, Joe Rogan's involved and all this kind of stuff. They're a gym, physical health kind of company, and their whole thing is human optimization. That's the thing, and I love that. I buy into that big time. I'm a sucker for it. And I think most people, we spoke about things like creatine and supplementation before we turn the mics on here as well. A lot of people are in love with this idea, especially nowadays. There's a lot of information about optimize yourself, become human 2.0, all this kind of stuff. Sell more, be better, blah, 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 blah. And it's all about optimization. And you used this phrase, it was maybe a week or two ago, and it was so simple and it blew my mind. You said we need to normalize before we optimize. And you've just said it there. Somatics, we've kind of illustrated that now in terms of before you go pulling 500 pounds, you need to be able to put your pants on. You need to be able to do normal movements, and a lot of people nowadays can't do normal movements. Yeah. And they're going out trying to do extreme things, the latest Instagram workout or whatever, but they can't even move properly. Yeah. But even in general life, that phrase rings so true because we want to be the best we can be. We want to take the supplements and we want to have the best job and all this kind of stuff. And it's all optimize. But most people in their day to day, and I feel it's fair to say this, haven't even found that even keel, that normal for them. We talked about before in the podcast, Irish people specifically being grand, but grand could be 2 out of 10. But it's just that's what their norm is. So normalizing, I think, is a much better phrase you're using for people first. Let's sort out and the basics. We always come back to the basics. Let's sort out the diet. Let's sort out the sleep. Let's sort out the mood. We talked about mindfulness. We talked about purpose. We'll dive into all that stuff now, I'm sure. But that, to me, makes so much more sense when you use the word normalize. We don't have to optimize any of that stuff because optimization, what's that, the last 1%? If you're at 99, you don't get the last 1%. I'd like to be at 99. That's pretty good. Like, it's better than being at 20%, 99%. But like that concept, you just said that casually to me, and I was like, Colin, stop. That's fucking brilliant. Like, well, that's obviously something you think about, and obviously something because like, I'm gonna blow a bit of smoke here now. The first time we met was in Fingalin's gym, and you were training. and you were doing outrageous things, like moving savage weight. And I understood form just from being in the field for so long. Everything you did was with the best of form, moving serious weight. And I remember being there training, and I was always one of these guys who just go in and just go at everything hard all the time, and never really put much thought into, like, I was the optimized guy. I see this guy do this on Instagram, I'm going to do it now, and like I just go at everything. I always trained real hard, but there was never a real. And I remember seeing you with the notebook and the reps and everything, and you were saying my next phase is this, and the stuff you used to be able to do, and I was like, Jesus Christ, like, what is that? So this is obviously a lifestyle you've built for yourself. You don't just preach this stuff, and you obviously got into somatics for a reason. I say it attracted you because you have that kind of mindset. But where did that come from in you? Like, is that something you learned over the years?
I don't know. In terms of like training and that, like,
just because like when you train like that and you're structured like that, that takes something. You have to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
Like, it's very hard to go into the gym and do the right thing.
Yeah.
Because there's so much stuff that you could possibly do.
Yeah,
and it's very hard to go in and do the right thing and apply maximum intensity, or apply 80% intensity because you understand your body only needs 80% today because you're in a deload. Like, that stuff, again, I'm 32 years of age, been training all my life. That stuff still just, it's very hard for me to have a good structured plan when you go into the gym, and then be able to apply the intensity, and then be able to block out all the external distractions. But that's you obviously need to learn systems like that. And I said you did Chinese boxing, and that's something I've no experience with in martial arts and things like that. You do learn a discipline of movement and things there as well. But like, you're obviously into this kind. You're obviously into building structures for yourself that allow you to perform.
Yeah. I think, well, if you talk about training, like, I done my due diligence. I did loads of research. The internet's there. We all have access to it.
Yeah, but there's cats playing the piano and people jumping off roofs on the internet. Like, what are we supposed to do?
I know. I was never that interested in the cats on the piano. If I get interested in something, I'll zero in on it, and I'll try and read as much as I can. And I'm always looking for the. If you read on anything for long enough, you'll start to see certain themes or principles, patterns emerging. And with training, like, I looked at what was the stuff that kept coming up as being important. So, for most people, it's compound movements, unless you're bodybuilding, where you need to do sort of isolation stuff. And so I tried to get an overlap between stuff I enjoyed doing and the stuff that was useful. And for me, that happened to be most of the basic stuff that I liked doing.
Okay.
The notebook was like, well, if I want to make progress, I have to be keeping track.
Yeah.
So that's just quite simple. Yeah. So like it wasn't like I was any mad. Oh, I'm gonna pull out my notebook. It was just like, okay, I need a notebook so I know what I did last week, and I know what I have an idea what I'm gonna do next week.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That just appealed to me. I'd be fairly, I wouldn't say dogmatic or anal about it, but it's just so I could keep track.
Yeah.
And there's otherwise, if you're not obsessing, you're guessing. Isn't that what they say? I mean, that's of course that's true. So you have to have some, because otherwise you're not training. You're just dicking around.
Yeah.
If you're not making, how are you going to make progress?
Yeah, the reason I asked it was a loaded question. I was hoping they were going to say that. The reason I asked the question was, like, everyone has a notebook, but being able to use the tool properly, or set a structure, or set a goal for yourself, is something I've always found really difficult. And when I talk to people, most people are in the same boat. They find that goal setting, like, I hated, I still do, hated being tested or assessed.
Yeah.
I always played sport, but I hated test days. I hated days. And I was always confident in my ability as whatever I was doing at the time, whatever it was, but I hated being tested. Never did 1 rep maxes, never did time sprints, I hated the bleed tests and stuff like that. Always performed well, hated them. And that bled into me not really ever setting goals, because what if I don't hit the goal? And I feel like today that's a very, very common theme, not just in training and physical pursuits, but in life in general. Like, being afraid to set a goal, or to have a routine or a structure because you might not hit it, or it's boring, or it's difficult to do, or there's too much information, etc. So that's why when I saw you doing it, and it wasn't just you had the notebook, you didn't just have a notebook, because I have a notebook and I doodle in it all the time. It was very, very structured, and if it was 100 kilos last week, it's 102.5 kilos this week, and that's just the way it goes. And then all of a sudden in 5 weeks it's 150 kilos or whatever. That was your bicep curl, wasn't it? Yeah, 150 kilos. But I think that's so applicable to everything. Training for me is a real, like, we're called the Prymal podcast. I like pairing stuff back to what's primal. Training is real primal. You go in and you're lifting stuff, or you're running, or you're jumping, or you're moving, and it's a real primal thing to do. But to do that with purpose is totally different. To do that with purpose, like, what's the phrase? Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
You have to have a purpose and a structure for training to get there. You have to have a purpose and a structure for diet to get where you want to go with diet. If it's weight loss or just longevity or health, for your career, for work, for school, even for relationships, for your own head. And this is a common theme over the last few months. I've been talking to a lot of people about this, is setting that structure in place for yourself before you need it. Because you're going to have a bad day. You're going to have many bad days. Most days now for people have something bad in them because it's the stress of everything: traffic, work, job, relationship. Like every day, that's chronic now. That's what we call it, chronic stress. If you don't have something, if you don't have your notebook, if you don't have something in place that no matter what happens, if it's a good day or a bad day, you do your thing, whatever your thing is, you're probably going to fail. And I fell into that trap for years and years and years and years of just going through the motions and like going hard, but going hard through the motions. So you're going, well, I said it last day with Stephen, who was on the podcast, the cow analogy I made up. Like you're going for that gate. All the cows are going. You're all shouldering and bumping and huffing and puffing. But like the gate's the wrong way. And you never see that because you're just going so hard. Having something every day that lifts the head, that pulls you out of that lets you see, oh, there's the herd going that way. Whether it's a good day, bad day, indifferent, that you do it every single day. It's like somatics, it's like training, it's like food, it's like anything. That's when I said about when I saw you doing the notebook and stuff like that, it kind of hit me flat in the face. Like, this guy's progressing because we weren't training together, but we were training in the gym, and I was just watching you continuously progress towards whatever your goal was at the time, and your goals changed. And I kind of was staying stagnant, training hard and long, but staying stagnant. And it kind of brought that right home to me. And then since then, in the years preceding that, I've been speaking to people on the podcast, speaking to people in the job, speaking to people in life, and that's all starting to come together now. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm getting older, and this is just what happens when you get older. You get that little bit of insight into things. But
maybe. I mean, because I'm a bit older than you, but
not much.
The other thing is though, like, a goal is important, but like, I was really enjoying the process as well, which was huge. Like, I wasn't actually that mad focused on the goal. I kept track of what I was doing so I could see where I was going. But like, I just used to be, I'd be in work going, I can't wait to go and train later.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because I loved it. I enjoyed it. So the goal was almost secondary in a way. The process was really enjoyable. And I think that's important as well. Like, if you're going to set a goal, well, make it something that's going to be challenging but manageable. Because if you overshoot and you don't make it, then you have the whole, I failed.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help. So it's like you said, like, if it's 100 this week, 102 next week, that doesn't sound out of the realms of possibility. You'll probably be able to do it. And then that's positive reinforcement. So you can keep going. But if you say, I want to do 150, it's like, that's not going to happen. It's too big of a jump.
Yeah.
So your goals have to be manageable and attainable.
Okay.
But still challenge. But I think the process is the most important thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you see that as a problem for people nowadays?
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. Talk about, like, they want the pain gone now. But it's like, well, you're going to have to work at it. Okay. It can be fairly quick, but you have to learn certain things, because at the moment there's things you don't know that you need to know to be able to resolve this problem. But as long as you put the time in, and in the beginning it requires more of an investment because obviously it's new.
Yeah.
So like learning anything, and then once you get a certain knowledge base, then it's just maintenance. Unless you want to go further in it. But for most people, it's just maintenance. Then it's like, okay, I have learned what I need to know. So like, your practice, like, okay, you come with a back pain. In the beginning, you have to do your practice every night and every morning. And then as things improve, you go, I can do it just at night time before I get to bed or first thing in the morning. And then as you go further, you go, I can do it every other day and I'm grand. And I know how to use it and I understand how to apply it. Then you're free, Then you're free to do what you want.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So for you, for example, what's the process? Your process, your daily process? Do you have things like, I know your somatics movement is one. Do you have things you do every day that give you that process, that feeling of I'm going to enjoy this today, and it's going to give me that buzz or context or that perspective or that whatever to help me keep going in the right direction? Do you have practices yourself you do every day?
Well, my movement practice.
Yeah,
that's kind of non-negotiable for me.
Yeah.
I mean, every day. Okay, nobody does it every day, but most days.
Yeah.
Maybe a day a month I mightn't do it. Writing, try to write a bit every day.
Yeah. Like creative writing or just
blog?
Oh, the blog. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Try to do a bit of writing every day. And now, to be honest, I had a big hiatus from that, so I've just got back into doing some writing for that. So that's one of my new ones.
Okay.
And try to eat reasonably good.
Yeah.
Nothing too, like, I don't do anything majorly special.
But it's not the key though.
Yeah, I guess it is.
You're normalizing.
Yeah, you're normalizing. Yeah, it's like try and eat sensibly. You know. Back in the gym now after the bit of a hiatus.
Yeah.
With lockdown and everything else, so that's back in. But other than that, like, I find my movement, that's probably going to sound crazy, but my somatic movement practice is the anchor for it all.
It's not crazy at all.
As long as I'm doing that, everything else kind of falls into place.
Yeah.
Because that's if I do get tense, if I do have a bad day, I get it out of the system when I'm doing that.
Yeah. And you called it non-negotiable. Drew Hennessy was on the podcast as well. He used the word non-negotiable too. He goes for a walk and he swims as well in the sea. And that phrase, non-negotiable, I think that's the key to this here. It's not a reactive thing. I had a bad day, so I will do this.
Yes.
This is a day, so I will do this. Every day, within reason, 95% of the time, I will do this practice. Because this is something I've found that I know gives me that feeling that I want, or gives me that perspective, or gives me that purpose, or gives me that relief. And whether I have a good day or a bad day, you have to do it, because if you wait for the day to be bad, you're probably going to be a headspace where you don't want to do it. You don't want to, like, people are going to be sick of hearing me saying this fucking thing, but the pull-up thing I always use as an example. Like, it's a good day or a bad day, it doesn't matter. I go and do, and it's only one pull-up. Now I've other things I do in the day, but that thing I'm just using it as a kind of a constant. I go and do that one pull-up, because usually, if it's a good day, you do one pull-up, whatever, like, it just adds to the good feeling of the day. If it's a bad day and you do that one pull-up, that's something you've won. The Navy SEAL thing about making your bed, same kind of thing. Multiple little things like that, and then the movement practice, and then your training, and then your nutrition could be something as well. Like Daniel Davey spoke about this, being into your food, mindful eating, enjoying what you're doing. Food is not just nutrition. Food is not just fuel. No. Now, food is fuel in a certain context, but food can be a social thing. It can be a spiritual thing. It can be and I love my food, but I love the process of eating my food. You mentioned, I can't remember, did we turn the mics on or not, but you mentioned, actually we'll get into this because this is very interesting. We were talking about introverts and extroverts, and there's so much stimulus. Like, I would class myself historically as an introvert, because I tick all the boxes, like, and there's that little anxious feeling all the time. I don't do well when there's lots of input. So, like, bars and stuff like that, it overwhelms me. I was laughing, Jill, my girlfriend, whenever we're in the car, she starts talking to me. I'm like, I need to focus on the driving here, right? And it's not because I'm an out fella or whatever like that, but there's so much going on that more stimulus coming in, it just unsettles me a little bit, all that kind of stuff. So I've actually lost my train of thought now as well, where I was going with this, but that the practices help to kind of regulate that for me. It kind of, like, enjoying my food when I'm sitting having my food. I really enjoy it. I don't have to think about it. I just enjoy the process of eating my food. And some people look at me and go, are you slow, or are you a bit dense or something like that? You're just sitting there just eating your food in silence. I'm actually just enjoying the process of eating my food, and I like that. Some people don't like that. Some people like to have the conversation. And I don't get me wrong, from running a podcast, I love having conversations and talking shite, like, but like, this environment is great for me because it's one-on-one and we're having a chat, and there's nothing else going on with the headphone. You feel like you're in this kind of zone. You can focus on what you're talking about. If there was 9 or 10 people in here now and there was stuff going on, I'd be really distracted and wouldn't be able to focus on what I was saying and what I was listening to. So for me, having things, it's important for me to eat a dinner every day. And when I don't have a dinner in a day, if I'm eating on the run, it's not just that I'm hungry. I feel edgy, because I haven't had the time to sit and just kind of have my dinner and digest my food or whatever, and doing the pull-up and doing the movement practices. And I'm reading this book, The Greatest Salesman, and it's 3 times a day. You read this mantra and you read this scroll 3 times a day. All of that, I'm not saying there's one thing that's perfect. All of that combined are things that I found. These are probably, I'll call them my non-negotiables now. So yeah, I think I'm learning more and more that this stuff works for me to make the bad feelings go away. You know what I mean?
The bad voices.
The bad voices go away. Well, the bad voices are still there talking, but why I like these conversations and talking to people like yourself is a lot of people are starting to say the same kind of thing. Yeah. The difference is the people who do it and the people that don't do it. And the people, like, everyone knows this now. Like, this kind of content is readily available. But my voice broke there. But doing it is different than reading about doing it. Doing it is different than thinking about doing it.
100%.
Yeah. And I think with the like, again, it's the stimulus. We have the social media, and we have the TV and the radio and all that, and they're all telling you, buy this book and do this thing and have this car and wear this watch, and all of these things are going to make you feel good and make you feel better. And it's all lies, because the book doesn't make you feel better. But if you find something in the book that you can do and you do it, that'll make you feel better. And I think that's something that's really missing. That part of the message seems to be missing. And I don't know, it's a consumerism message. Just want you to buy it. I don't care if you use it or not, just want you to buy it. But that's one thing. Do you notice that is kind of a common trend now with people? Like, you see people coming in, you're dealing with people with stress. You're not a psychotherapist, but you're helping them manage their stress in a different way. You're giving them a tool that they can use But do you recognise that stress from people coming in? Is it more prevalent now than you would have seen before?
Oh, it's mad. Like, people are so stressed.
Yeah.
They don't even realise that how stressed they are. It's a bit like, the frog in the slowly boiling water.
Yeah.
That's what life is like now for most people, because modern life is full of stressors. There's so many things going on in our lives all day, every day, that it's not surprising, really, because we've created this technological environment that is so far removed from what we've come from. Like, the human body hasn't changed much in however many thousands and thousands of years, but the environment in the last 15 years has changed exponentially. There's stressors everywhere: your phone, your email, there's online, social media. Everything moves at 100 miles an hour. We're used to living in forests where things change over thousands of years.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Over generations. No, now it's just mad. So every time you're going about your day, every time you interact with something, or something happens, or a phone beeps, or an email comes in, your body responds to that once you become aware of it by moving. There's a little response of muscular contraction, either to withdraw from it, red light, or to go towards it and deal with it, green light. But that's going on all day, every day. And every time you do that, you're accumulating tension in your system. Because when people talk about stress, what you're really talking about is muscular tension. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think everyone kind of, once you sort of point it out to them, they get it. It's kind of undeniable. Like, we were here the other day and your phone beeped and you could feel the anxiety. You want to look at it.
Yeah. I think everyone's familiar with, that little glowing light that comes down the top when you have a notification. If you see that, or if you hear the message tone, it's like, it's just that, you just want to move towards it. Like, hi guys, sorry to interrupt you, but just a little reminder that today's guest is Colin Mc Donnell, a Somatics Instructor and Practitioner and a good friend of yours truly. And today we're talking movement, mobility, self-learning and much more. If you want to learn more about anything we cover in this episode, you can get in touch with the team at podcast@prymal.ie. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Prymal Pro, PRYMALPRO, and everything we mention will be available in the show notes over at www.prymal.ie/Colm Mc Donnell. Colin has also kindly offered a 20% discount to any listeners of the podcast for a one-to-one online movement session with his company Learn Somatics. Just use the code PRYMALSOMA, PRYMALSOMA, when you're booking the appointment.
So say every time that happens, there's a little bit of tension getting generated in the system. Multiply it by the 1,000 times a day that happens. Okay, now suddenly you're really stressed and really tense, right? But it's all coming out of the lower part of the brain. You're not really conscious of it happening. It's just a slow drip, drip, drip of tension.
The lizard brain. The
lizard brain, yeah, exactly. And that's how you end up stiff, tight, can't move, back hurts, neck hurts. It's like, what am I going to do? You're that frog in the boiling water. You're just getting cooked, basically.
Yeah.
So you need some way of getting out of the pot of water. And that's where your movement practice comes in. Because essentially what you're doing when you practice somatics is you're regulating the tension in the system, okay? Whether it's in the back or the front, you kind of address the whole body. And once you start bringing down the muscular tension, you're taking away the physical effect of the stress. So now you're able to come back down to baseline, which means you can get up the next day. Well, you're relaxed, you're going to sleep better. You're going to feel better. You can get up the next day with your reserve recharge, let's say. I sometimes use an analogy. Everyone has a certain degree of tolerance for stress or capacity to deal with stress. So imagine it's like a bucket. And every time you have one of these little stimulatory experiences during the day, good, bad, indifferent, bit of water goes in the bucket. So over the course of a couple of weeks, a couple of days, water's filling up in the bucket. If you don't have some way of emptying that bucket, at some point it's going to be filled, and then you're going to breach your capacity to deal with stress. And then something's going to happen. Either you're going to get sick, or you're going to just feel terrible, you're going to have pain, whatever it is, who knows. So you need to have some way to empty the bucket. So somatics is your way to empty the bucket.
Yeah.
So that you can start every day with an empty bucket.
That's a brilliant plug.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's perfect, yeah.
Yeah. So talking about how we respond to those stimuli in the environments. And again, we respond with those reflexes, whether it's the back, the front, or, well, to be honest, when you're just going about your day, unless you have a collision with someone, it's more red light or green light.
Yeah.
So if you're a super stressful job, it's going to be the back. Do you want to do a pandiculation now, actually? So we can kind of
let's
put a
go
bit
for
of
it, yeah.
frame on this.
100%.
Okay. So we've been talking about the accumulation of tension in your system. So another analogy you can use, we use a lot of time with people, is you brush your teeth, right? Because plaque builds up on your teeth. So you have to clean them every day. And occasionally you go to the dentist and they get a deep clean, but The rest of the time, it's on you.
Yeah.
Right. So this somatics is a bit like that, in that you're accumulating tension in your system. Sometimes you might want to go and see the dentist, although it's much more enjoyable than going to the dentist, and get rid of some of that tension. But the rest of the time, it's on you. You got to get rid of the tension that's accumulating during the day. So how do you do it? So our main sort of technique that we use is called pandiculation. And it's real simple. It involves making a voluntary contraction of the muscles, because the muscles are already getting tight anyway because of the subcortex is telling them to get tight. When you make a voluntary contraction, you engage the learning part of your brain, okay? It's the sensory motor cortex. So you're superseding what's going on in the lower part of the brain. It's like going to the CEO as opposed to going to the line manager. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
Okay, so once you've made a voluntary contraction of a muscle, you have 3 choices. You can contract it more, you can hold the contraction, or you can, what else can you do?
Relax.
You can let it go. Yeah. and that's the crux of it, really.
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to do that process. And then you've got a little principle that you can apply everywhere. So here, we'll do one.
Okay.
We'll do one with you. So I'm going to guide Danny through this now, and if you're listening, you can follow along and do this as well and have an experience. So all you need to do, Danny, is just sit sort of on the edge of your chair, so just so you can let your arms hang down. Okay, cool. And just sit up to whatever you feel is straight.
Okay.
Okay, so pick a shoulder. It doesn't really matter which one, but you're gonna go your right shoulder. Okay, Grant. So all I want you to do is I want you to shrug your shoulder up to your ear. Okay. Now keep it there long enough that you can start. Actually, close your eyes so you're not getting external distraction. Just keep it there long.
Stay on your side of the table now.
There you go. Keep it there long enough so that you can feel clearly that you're contracting the top of your shoulder to draw it up. You're using your traps.
Okay.
Okay. Now, as slowly as you can, start to let the weight of your arm bring it down. Stop there. Change your mind. Go back up. Again, feel what happens when you bring it up. Good. Now go down slow enough that you can sort of feel the sensation of letting it come down. What's it feel like to let the shoulder come down? Stop there. Come back up about 2 inches. Stop. Good. And again, come down nice and slow. Stop there. Come back another little bit. Again, feel how the contraction is less, but it's still there. And again, start to let it go. Okay, good. Now stay there. One more time, all the way up to the top. Okay, now come down all the way as slowly as you can and as smoothly as you can. So you're letting your shoulder relax. Very deliberately though. This is very conscious relaxation. Let the weight of your arm take it down. Okay, good. And now just forget about it.
Forget about it.
Okay, now stay there. Just close your eyes again and compare the sensation of your left shoulder to your right shoulder and notice if there's anything different about them.
Yeah, there's an immediate difference between right and left.
Okay, and what does that, like if you were to describe that, what's the difference feel like?
It feels like it's lower. It's hanging lower.
Right, exactly. And if you did this at home, go and look in the mirror and see if your shoulder that you've done the pandiculation on has dropped. Usually that's what happens. And if it did, you can do the same thing on the other side so you're not lopsided. But that's a simple principle. So imagine if you can do that for every muscle in your body.
Yeah. I'll describe it for people because obviously I've done this before, and it's difficult for people sometimes when they're listening or watching they might think we're scamming them or something like that.
Yeah,
but I've done this many times before, and what you've described a certain way to me at the very start, and it's so like this that I'm going to say it here now. You described a cat stretching.
Yeah.
Or a baby stretching. And the first thing, like imagine stretching when you wake up in the morning. This is Colin's words, not mine. When you wake up in the morning, it's kind of like a squeeze and then a stretch.
Exactly.
And the second thing that I always thought this was like is imagine you've had a really hard, long day and you come home and then you start to relax, and it's only when you start to relax you realise, I've been holding my shoulders here. You didn't even realise it until you actually thought about it, or someone says to you, geez, your shoulders are all hunched up, and it's only when you actually acknowledge that, like, and then you relax and you realise there was another 50% to go there in terms of relaxation, and you don't even know that unless you actually intervene. So when you do this movement, this contract, relax, this pandiculation, that's what I feel always, and I can feel, I do genuinely feel this now, and even though I've done this many times before, when you do that movement, it's like you're on 20% without even realising it.
Yeah.
And when you go on 100% and then turn it off, you delete that 20%, you're off 100%. You're like, whoa, there was 20% there. But you don't know that until you do it. That's what I always feel like.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And it's like that because we do full body movements and all, I feel it everywhere. Every way that we do this, I feel that feeling. And I actually, to the point where I get freaked out if I do one side and don't get time to do the other side. I was like, whatever I'm doing, I have to stop because I have to do my other side pandiculation here because I feel like I'm off then. The other side's like, what's going on here? I'm still on 20%. Like,
I know what you're saying about being wanting to do the other side, so you're symmetrical, but it's actually really good practice to do one side and then have a walk around.
And compare.
Yeah, because then you can have the contrast.
Yeah.
And then it becomes really apparent, you know, and it doesn't have to be about, that's bullshit or whatever. It's like, you
That's
can do
really
it.
important,
You can do it. And listen, there's loads of somatics online.
Yeah.
You can go to your heart's content and look at the videos and practice the movements. If you do them slowly and carefully, you'll feel a difference after you do them.
Yeah.
You know?
I like this idea. You used this phrase feedback loop to me before.
Oh yeah.
I love that. I love that idea, because people think about this kind of stuff like things I have to do every day.
Yeah.
A medication I have to take, or a breathing practice, or a movement practice, or a book I have to read, or whatever. And that sounds like a lot of work to people, and they're like, why should I have to do this for the rest of my life? Should I not just be normal? Like, if I'm having to do this for the rest of my life, surely you're not really fixing the problem. And I always used to use a different kind of phrasing. I didn't use the feedback loop. I used to say to people, well, look, the way we're living now, or whatever you're doing in your daily life now, is actively contributing to this stress. So, like, you have to go do your job, right? So you either quit your job or keep doing your job. Okay, you're not going to quit your job, right? If you're going to keep doing your job is going to continuously cause you stress.
Right.
So you have to do something to mitigate that stress. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening. You have to intervene. Yeah. And even like the way you can't intervene is quit the job. Just like you can't chop off your arm if your arm is sore. So like you have to do something actively to intervene. Otherwise, stop complaining, because you're not going to do anything about it. You're going to have to live with that or deal with that. So when you said feedback loop, and you actually put this in very, very scientific terms as well. This is not just a kind of a concept. If you have chronic tightness or chronic pain or chronic fatigue or chronic anything in your body, that is sending a loop back to your brain, which is sending a loop back down again to tighten again, and sending a loop back again, saying it's tight, and sending a loop back down again. So you have this pain in your shoulder, say, you're getting constant feedback that there's pain there. Protect, tighten, constant feedback, protect, tighten. The more it protects and tightens, the more pain you get. It's a loop. But if you intervene in that process, even if you can't tap into the brain with an electrode and switch that part of your brain off, or take a medication that shuts down, which you shouldn't do, which they give you a painkiller, which just shuts down the pain, doesn't fix the problem. If you intervene in that loop at some point by saying, right, now I'm going to take control of this movement. My shoulder's stuck like this in anterior rotation or whatever. I'm going to take control of this, and I'm going to teach you how to go backwards. And I'm just going to keep doing this until my brain realizes, well, actually, we're not getting that feedback anymore. So, okay, switch it off. And then you're off 100%. I really liked that. Because you can apply that to everything, really. Like,
do you want me to get into that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly right. So like the neuromuscular system is a feedback loop.
Yeah.
You've got your brain, and you've got the nerves, and you've got the muscles. So one end you've got your brain, and the other end you've got your muscles. But it started as a hierarchy of control there. You've got your spinal cord reflexes. The main one would be of interest to us would be the stretch reflex. Then above that you've got the lower part of the brain, the subcortex, where the reflexes are coming out of. What we were discussing earlier: green light, red light, and trauma. And then above that, then you've got the learning part of the brain, which is the crinkly part for people who aren't up on neurology, the part with all the creases in it. So if you look at the hierarchy end of things, so lowest, the production line, the guy on the production line is the spinal cord. He just does what he's supposed to do, never deviates. He has a job to do, and that's all he do, right? The job of the spinal cord generally is stretch reflex. And that's to protect the integrity of a muscle if you, in the instance that it gets stretched beyond its, it's there, it's protective. So it serves a very legitimate purpose, and we don't want it to be desensitized in any way because it is protective. Okay.
So you stretch too far, spinal cord kicks in.
Exactly.
Small contraction, pull it back, don't let it tear.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So it's there. It's going. I don't want to injure this muscle.
Yeah.
Because then I might be able to survive. So the stretch reflex kicks in, right? But above that, then the reflexes are coming out of higher than the spinal cord. They're coming out of the subcortex. So that's what we're talking about here, where you're going about your day and you've had a shitty day in work, and that may be tense, or you had to deal with someone you don't particularly like, or your kid is sick, or who knows, you're having financial problems. There's all sorts of things going on. Your tension responses, then they're coming out of the lower part of your brain. So they're telling your muscles to be tight all the time. And that's again like that analogy, that accumulating tension, accumulating plaque. You're just constantly getting tighter and tighter. So if you try and stretch it, because the stretch reflex is down lower than where the reflex is coming from, it doesn't work, right? Because you're not getting higher up in the feedback loop to make a difference. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you make a voluntary contraction, that's coming out of the part of the brain that's above the subcortex, the sensory motor cortex, essentially, right? So now you supersede what's coming out of the subcortex. You take over. It's like the thing is on autopilot, and you go, I'm going to drive for a bit, right?
Yeah.
You make a contraction. And as soon as you do it yourself and pay attention to it, you're in control of it.
Yeah.
And as I said, then you're back to your three choices. Okay, I'm going to slowly relax this. And then it's the only way you can actually reduce motor output into your muscles.
Yeah.
So you have to use voluntary movement
Yeah.
to reset the muscle length and to reset the tension level.
So to use your analogy, that's your bucket emptying exercise.
100%.
So every day, whether the bucket is 1% full or 99% full, every day you're doing your bucket emptying.
Yeah.
You're interfering in that feedback loop. You're emptying the bucket, and that's your bucket emptying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You're emptying the bucket by getting into your practice in that way. The thing is, that feedback loop. If you don't take charge of it, everything else is gonna.
Yeah.
Everything that goes on in your life is going to be affecting you because you have to respond to everything.
Well, this is the point, I think. The point is, unless you take control of this, take ownership of it. If you don't, you can't be surprised when stuff starts to happen. And this is it always sounds preachy and sounds like you're having a go with somebody. It's not, because it's taken me a long time to even learn 1% of this. I'm on a learning journey here. I don't know this stuff. I'm learning from people like you and people I listen to. But it's really, really obvious that unless you're willing to take ownership of this, your health, your movement, your relationship, your job, whatever, stuff's just going to happen. You don't have control, and you have to react then, and you're in reactive kind of response mode, and response mode is stressful. If you wake up every day and you don't know what the hell's going to happen today and you just have to react to everything, that is so stressful for two reasons. One, it's stressful thinking about it, and number two, it's stressful when it happens and when you're equipped to handle whatever's going to happen today. But if you can put things in place that are your non-negotiables, or things that don't move, don't change. Well, don't move is not a good term for somatics. You're moving, but things that don't change, you do them every single day or most days, that gives you control. Then you feel confident. Then that automatically eliminates a lot of that anxiety and stress. So that's really, really important. Like, we used to talk about this with functional medicine all the time. Don't keep going and expecting the doctor, because doctors are fantastic people. But how can a doctor know every single thing about every single person that comes in? He doesn't, or she doesn't. They know medicine, but you know you. And if you can tap into knowing you, and if you can put things in place that you know are good for you and remove things that are not good for you, you're doing most of the work there. And then you can go to the doctor when something really goes wrong that you can't handle. But that's going to be so rare because you're doing so many things right. And I think it gets a little bit intimidating or a little bit annoying for people to keep hearing this over and over and over again, because it's difficult to step back. That first step back to have a look is really hard because there's so many moving parts. It's like, what do I look at first? Like, I'm sick, I'm overweight, I'm maybe dealing with depression or anxiety, I have a bad relationship, I have a bad job. Like, there's millions of things that can be going wrong in your life, and to have to step back and look at all of that is really intimidating for people. It's really scary, and I don't have time for it, and geez, I have to keep going. But that first step is usually a snowball effect. You do one small thing, and this is so cliched and almost oversaid, but that first small thing, and like, it could be somatics, or it could be your pull-up, or it could be a book, or it could be anything. That could be the snowball. And even if it's not, do another small thing, because that one could be the snowball. And none of them might be the snowball, but then you've done 10 small things, and now you're doing 10 small things. So, wow, look at that. You've got a daily practice. You've got a day. And wow, my stress has gone down. And geez, my stress went down. My thyroid all of a sudden started to act normally again. I don't need this thyroid medication. My blood pressure regulated. Oh, maybe I don't need the blood pressure medication. That's kind of how it happens, from what I've seen. Now, I'm not saying I'm there, but I've had experiences in my life where that's true, so I can speak to that. You've had experiences in your life where that's true, so you can speak to that.
Yeah.
Most people have done something at some point, either accidentally or on purpose, where they go, oh, that made me feel really good and actually was good for me. Yeah. Like, pick that thing. That's a good place to start.
Gravitate towards that. What makes you feel good. Yeah, that's it. And like, here's the thing. All systems in your body work better when you're relaxed.
Yeah.
Because then you're in parasympathetic.
Yeah.
And what's a parasympathetic system? Rest, digest, and repair.
Yeah.
So if you can't sleep and your digestion's a mess, you're not going to be repairing.
Yeah.
So, and in fact, if those things are happening, you're likely in sympathetic, which is fight, flight, or freeze. And actually, if you look at that, fight or flight would be indicative of green light or Landau response, because you're constantly
you're
dealing. You're dealing with stuff. And freeze will be indicative of that startle reflex, where you've shut down, you've withdrawn from what's going on. So if you're in sympathetic nervous system state, you can't be in parasympathetic. So immediately then you're on a losing streak, because you can't rest, digest, and repair.
Yeah.
So if you're tense, you're not going to be able to sleep. You're not going to be able to consume your food. And I know one of your guests was talking about not even what you eat, but what you absorb.
Yeah, Robbie. Yeah.
You want to be relaxed, right? Once you're relaxed, you can go to bed and get to sleep and hopefully stay asleep. When you're relaxed, you can digest your food. So you're going to get the nutrition. If you're doing, because maybe sometimes people are really working on their nutrition, but their digestive system's a mess. So even though they're putting good food in, they're not getting the benefit of it.
Yeah.
So being in that parasympathetic nervous system state and being relaxed, that should be your default state. Now, the flip side of that, not the flip side, but another factor about that is once you're relaxed, when you go back out into the world and you start dealing with the life, you start to realize. So if you go out and you're super relaxed, you start to notice that situation winds me up. I respond to that, okay, or that person, or that particular job, or whatever it is you have to do in your life. Now, obviously, you can't cut those things out. Well, some of them maybe you can. That's fine.
Yeah.
But then you have the opportunity to go, do you know what? Now that I can see how I respond to that, I'm going to choose to respond to that differently, and then I won't accumulate the tension. Do you know what I mean? So it's not about, because like stress is actually benign. It's how you respond to it that's the problem. And it's, you know, we see that like some people are just, everything just floats past them and they never get stressed, and then other people, every little thing sets them off.
Yeah.
So you want to put yourself in that position where you can step back and go, I'm going to choose not to respond to that, or I'm going to respond to it differently in a way that it makes more sense to that and is healthier for me.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so and again, you're getting into that whole, just giving yourself, being the witness.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, yeah. You said this. We spoke about. I think did I talk to Stephen about this? I think I did, in terms of having a conversation that becomes a debate, and being able to step back and realize that I'm not my opinion here. My opinion is my opinion. Being able to step out of that. Now again, it's a task for me or anybody to be able to do it.
Absolutely,
it is a difficult thing to do, and like what you're talking about, Dave, being able to walk around and remove yourself from situations, that's a very hard thing to do, and not unachievable by any means. And if you think it's unachievable, that's a losing mentality. Like that, you can get there, but being able to remove yourself and be the witness, that's a great way of putting it, is, I think, it's massively important, because then you don't get consumed by the emotion of the situation, whatever that emotion is, and that emotion then is almost 100% going to put you into fight or flight, or either red if you're shrinking away from it, red, or if you're rearing up towards it, like green light. And there's a certain, like again, like you trained and you're involved in combat sports and you're involved in meeting your challenge head on, and anyone who's involved in any sort of sport or even work, corporate environment, anything like this, you're kind of taught, meet this challenge head on, meet this with fists up and chest out and all that kind of stuff, which is fine in certain contexts once you're able to switch that off.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big key, is being able to switch that off and not having to do every single thing with that same level of aggression. Now, you do see a lot of coaches, business coaches, online coaches, kind of these kind of guys, and some of them are good, but a lot of them are this influence kind of model where do what I do and you'll be successful, and it's all about being super aggressive and going for what you want and sacrificing everything along the way. And yeah, there's elements of truth in certain situations in your life where you might have to do that, like the fight game, or if you're in a military situation, or if you're protecting your family or something like that. Absolutely. And I'm a big advocate of that. Like, develop the tools to be able to protect what's yours or what you love or whatever. Like, don't just be naive and go through life thinking I don't need to be able to take care of myself, or because life shouldn't be hard on me. Life is going to be hard on you, so be able to, but don't live your entire life like that. That should be the 1% of time when you have to switch it on and you go. Outside of that, it's really important, I think, to be able to step out, be the witness, analyze the situation. And most guys who are into any sort of fight or military game, like it's guys like me on a GA pitch walking around thinking they're hard men, like who end up with the highest levels of stress and aggression and getting in fights in public and all that kind of, not that I'm getting in fights in public, but you know what I mean. But it's the guys who are actually involved in these practices, like military or combat practices. They know. Avoid the situations. Don't get into those, because you're not going to win anything. Like, yeah, I'm well able to handle myself. My fists are lethal weapons. Like, I could probably put this guy in his ear. But avoid the situation. That's a stressor. There's no need for that. You could get hurt. You get stressed out. Being able to do that, I think, that's a skill everybody should learn, but nobody does anymore. And nowadays, and we're getting into the politics of this now. Nowadays, we're almost taught that you have a right not to be put out by anything. You have a right not to be the aggressee, like you have a right to. No, absolutely not. Jeez, like if you teach somebody that's a recipe for someone to be anxious, because they believe that they have and when they actually run into a situation, which happens every single day to everybody, where something doesn't go the way they want it to go, in your head you're like, well, I have a right, and then it's a very stressful thing to think, well, why is this happening to me? And then you become the victim. What should I? And then you shrink. Then it's probably the red light reflex you're talking about. You're shrinking into yourself. So like I think learning that and giving yourself the tools and the ability to deal with that kind of stuff, acknowledging it, and then being able to put it to bed and knowing it's there when you need it, is very, very important. I went in a real roundabout way of saying that one thing there.
Yeah. Well, what you're learning to do is you're learning how to self-regulate.
There you go. Yeah. Managed to tidy it all up in one sentence for me there, Colin. I just spent 5 minutes talking about it.
It was a good rant. So when you have that opportunity to step back and observe what's going on, you're giving yourself the opportunity to go, well, how do I want to deal with this? And okay, like it's hard. Not going to deny,
It's nearly impossible.
It's nearly impossible,
but it's not impossible.
But it's not impossible, And but another thing, like if you get into the culture of it and all, is like I think we've a real bad habit of framing everything as a battle.
Yeah.
The war on cancer, like cancer isn't an enemy. It's just something that happens. It I don't mean it's something that happens, but it's not a battle. It's a problem.
Yeah.
It's a puzzle.
Yeah.
It's something that needs to be figured out intellectually. Not fought. But we love to frame everything as the war on this, the war on drugs. It's like we're losing that one as well because there's loads of drugs around.
Yeah.
So if your default stance for dealing with things is to frame it as a battle, you're always fighting. That's exhausting.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Pick your battles. There are, like you said, there's times where you do have to do that. Maybe you're involved in a job that's very combative, boardroom stuff as well. But who knows? But think of things as challenges or puzzles as opposed to battles, and then you can approach them in a different way, in a way that makes it's a bit kinder to yourself and probably won't make you won't stress you out as much.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I'm only thinking as you're speaking now because I'm reading this. I have referred to it a few times. A friend of mine, Donald, recommended this book, The Greatest Salesman. But it's about building habits and repetition and learning how to put things in place for yourself. And the scroll, the chapter I'm on at the moment is I will greet this day with love in my heart, and it's 3 pages, and it's all about love. And I'm not trying to get too hippy dippy on this, but love. If you're able to assess situations with a positive slant as opposed to a negative slant, and I suppose it's kind of like what we're saying here. Don't automatically assume the guy sitting across the table wants to now he might want to do you out of something. And nowadays the salesmen probably do want to do you out of things a lot of the time. But if you were able to analyse that situation from a different perspective of this is just a person, this is just a situation, this is not an aggression, or this is not an attack on me. If you're able to do that, and like you repeat this mantra 3 times a day every day, so a little bit of it has to get in there, that's really powerful. Because you can sit down in a lot of situations, not all, but say the chat now. If you're face to face with a lion in the wild, maybe don't say, "I greet this day with love in my heart." Maybe just
run,
hightail it, get out of there. But in the majority of situations we meet nowadays, it's a highly competitive corporate world. It's a highly competitive world in general for everything. But if you can have a different perspective on that, you just switch around slightly and you're looking at it from a positive viewpoint, with the love in your heart. That almost becomes, and in the book it says, becomes your shield. That becomes your protection. Yeah. You don't have to use the fists as your protection, or the superior intellect, or insult somebody else, or put someone else down, or meet them on the battlefield. You can change the rules a little bit. That's what I'm kind of getting from this, is you can kind of change the rules, and then someone comes at you, but then they miss because you're not where they thought. You're not meeting them with aggression, and then in many cases, do you ever meet somebody and they walk into a room, and everyone knows these kind of guys and girls, I suppose, walk into the room and it's the chest out and the arms out, and they're immediately challenging everybody in the room. I'm the alpha and I'm stamping my authority on this. Again, some situations, maybe, but most social situations, there's no need for that. And if you don't meet them with the similar kind of in their face, if you don't give them the challenge they're looking for, but you say, "How's it going, man?" They're totally diffused, and then all of a sudden, everyone's happy. And but that could have gone really bad. That could have ended up with 2 or 3 hours of eyeballing across the room, and then, "What do you say to me?" And then all of a sudden, boom, we've got a fight break out, or both of you are stressed, or everybody's in a bad mood, or everyone picks up on that energy. So like when I'm listening to you speak or reading that book, it's about these common threads keep coming out over and over again.
Well, here's something that started jumping out at me when you're talking about that story. Like if you picture that person who's coming in with that alpha male.
It's you. It's you I'm talking about.
What does he look like? And I don't mean features. I mean, how does he carry himself?
Yeah.
Think about it. Describe it to me.
Green light. Chest out, back tight.
I'm here.
Chin out in your face. I'm here. This is me. Yeah.
Yeah. So just see how it's not just a physical manifestation, or it's not just something in the muscles. It's a whole way of carrying yourself, and like not always a good way. Yeah. Like you can be confident without being obnoxious. Let's say.
Well, this is where sometimes I get ripped on this, is because. I'm sorry I cut across you there, but like some people will teach you to present an air of confidence, but there's a difference between confidence and aggression or arrogance. And everybody can. People are really intuitive. Anybody in a room could look at your man, like what's he looking for? Like he's coming. Now there's always a little bit of kind of look at your man, with the big biceps or whatever. But most people can pick up on that energy straight away, and most people can send. Women will always say this. Men and women will say this. A confidence is very attractive. But an overconfidence is very unflattering. And everybody can smell that. As soon as someone walks in the room, like, you can be a big, huge fella with big arms and a big chest and the alpha male, but it's the way you carry yourself is totally different. And it's, people are so intuitive. They don't even know they're picking this stuff up, but they go, what's with your man? Or, this your man looks like a nice fella. It's so subtle, but it can completely change that interaction.
Exactly, because so much of our communication is non-verbal anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's all through body language, which is, you're getting into that stuff like Amy Cuddy, you know, the power poses.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking about. You know, they'll say, oh, so maybe you got to do a big presentation. You know, go in, stand up straight, make yourself feel tall, make yourself feel confident and powerful. You know, so, and again, that's green light. You want to be able to go there when you need to.
When you need to, yeah.
But you don't want to be living there all the time because it's exhausting. Or, you know, the opposite would be like they said. I think she calls it like constrictive or something poses. That's red light. You know, like if you sit in a ball, if you go into the corner and roll into a ball and stay there for half an hour, how long do you think it's going to take before you actually start to feel miserable?
5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, right. There's something in the actions of the body that tells us what to feel, you know. But of course you can manipulate that. That's the thing.
Which
That's
is
what
the feedback loop you're talking about.
The feedback loop, yeah. So, and of course, then what? Like they even talked about hormones and everything. Amy Cuddy did with the power poses. Oh, this can change your hormones. Wow. Now, and I know that. I know there was some kind of. They've been finding it hard to get a real consistent result out of that. But that shouldn't be a big leap really, because I mean anyone who trains knows, you know, it jacks up your cortisol. Sorry, well, it influences your hormones. Well. Yeah. There's a massive, or you know, you get growth hormone release when you do compounds and stuff like that. Or if you run a lot, you're going to jack up your cortisol. This sort of thing. So these are motor outputs that influence the endocrine system,
and you can control them.
Exactly. That's the real nub. It's like, oh, wait a minute. So plus if you're super stressed, you're going to be pumping out cortisol the whole time. So you want to be able to get that under control, because then cortisol makes you gain body fat and, you know, has a whole load of other problems if it's not, you know, if it's constantly being produced. Because again, all these hormones and things, we need them. Yeah.
Oh, we spoke about cortisol before. Amazing hormone that if you can harness it properly, incredible, especially for sleep and for exercise and performance, stuff like that. But when it's never off,
it's a problem. Everything's kind of cyclical. You want to be able to have things like, particularly hormones. I mean, they're pulsatile. If you're constantly jacking up your adrenaline, if you're taking pre-workouts or whatever. Yeah. Like, well, you shouldn't really need to be taking them every time you work out. It's probably
you shouldn't be taking that grenade explode before you work out.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I mean, I was a victim of that as well. Yeah. Maybe that explains some of what was going on in the gym.
You coming in with bloodshot eyes and steam coming out your ears.
The worst would be when you take one of them things and then something happened and you couldn't go to the gym and you're like rattling. But you can manipulate the hormonal environment to a degree based on what you do movement-wise. Yeah. And again, that comes back down to the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system modes. So the whole thing is all sort of joined up now. Because the mind, you see, I think one of the biggest problems we have is that the mind-body split. And because everyone knows, like when you close your eyes and you're lying down at night, where does your mind end and your body begin? There's no edges. Yeah. No, it's all just...
It's not well defined,
It's not well defined. It's because all you feel is just sensation. Yeah. Whether that's I'm hungry, I'm cold, I'm tired, I'm anxious, I'm whatever, I'm stiff, I'm comfortable. It's just sensation. Yeah. So you got to improve your ability to monitor those sensations and manipulate them. And the only way you can manipulate them is through movement. Yeah. Really.
And kind of stop trying to isolate them as this is my mind, this is separate than my body.
Yeah. There is no like, well, this is my opinion. There is no defining line. There's not even a border. You know, I do a thing when I'm trying to explain. I have it in my blog actually. It's about you know, we have the mental, the physical, and the emotional. I don't know if I was talking to you about this before, but if you make it out like a Venn diagram.
Oh yeah.
So you have a circle, physical, emotional, mental, right? You live in that spot in the middle. Your physical's always changing because you're always moving. Your mental's always changing because thoughts, and your emotional's always changing because deal with life. Yeah. But it's all through that spot in the middle. You experience it all as one sort of ongoing just experience of yourself. And that's what the soma is Hanna defined as the body experience from within. So now we're getting into like first person perspective, right, versus third person perspective. Yeah. So like I'm sitting here, I'm looking at you. I don't know what you feel inside. So my experience of looking at you and going, there's Danny, is 100% different from your experience of you being Danny, sitting there in the chair looking over at me. Yeah. But then I'm having my own first person experience as well.
Yeah.
And when you're working with somatics, I'm trying to help you have an experience. I'm trying to help you change your first person experience. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Whereas a lot of the traditional models, it's looking at third person. Okay, what's wrong? What needs to be fixed?
Yeah.
So we're coming at it from that other side. It's like helping you have that experience.
Yeah.
Like I know what it feels like to relax me back. Now I want to help you have that experience as well, and learn how to do it for yourself. Then, so you can, take it forward.
Yeah. Is it kind of like, now I've never done an ayahuasca journey or anything like, well, I suppose we talked about the ketamine before.
Next podcast.
Next podcast, yeah.
Live ayahuasca.
Live ayahuasca, yeah. No, Daniel, go on an ayahuasca journey. But the guide, when you do an ayahuasca journey, as far as I understand, you have a guide, and the guide is trying to help you understand the journey so you can have the experience. So I think they're trying to help you understand. Have you had any? Do you know anything about ayahuasca? Or
I know about it. I've never done it.
Yeah,
I would quite like to do it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think on that point, it's very important to be open-minded about that kind of stuff as well. And I said before, it's not about the substance or the movement or the breathing or the anything. It's about what that particular tool can help you with. And I think things like psychedelics are incredible. I don't have a very, very deep understanding of them, but I'm reading a lot more and I'm learning a lot more as we go over the last year, especially. And I think in terms of, you talked about helping guide people through somatics. There's similarities with something like an ayahuasca journey where you have a guide, but that guide isn't there to try and fix you or fix your problems, and they're not a therapist, for example. Now, they do have clinics they use these psychedelics with therapists as well in conjunction, but it's more to help you have that experience that you're going to learn from, and then you are going to be able to apply what you've learned to yourself. So the guide is only a guide. You are the person doing the work, and you are the person learning the stuff. And when it comes to psychedelics, I mean, this stuff literally blows my mind, because a lot of the issues I feel that me and people I know have nowadays are learned issues. We've bought into this model of whatever. Now, people can wave the conspiracy theory card and all that, but we've bought into a model, and that model is not necessarily good for us. The model of life and society and the way we live now, and the jobs we do and the cities we live in and all that kind of stuff. And these kind of practices, be they breathing or psychedelics. Now, psychedelics just tend to be a little bit more acute, but you can get there with other stuff.
Slightly more acute.
They help you to remove all of that learned stuff to get back to what's the original. What's the blueprint? What's the original here? And then when you get there, you go, whoa. When you get there, you realise, it's like when you realise you've been carrying the 20% on your shoulder the whole time. You do your somatic movement, you realise, I was carrying that. When you do something like this, like a psychedelic, you realise, I've been carrying this for my entire life, and maybe there was a reason, maybe there was a trauma, but even if there wasn't, we were doing things every single day that are contributing to this sense of self. This is who I am because this is what my boss says I am, and this is what my girlfriend says I am, and this is the car that I drive, and these are the clothes that I wear, hence this is what I am. And it removes all of that, and you're like, whoa, that's actually not what I am. What I am is this thing, this moving, breathing, living thing, like all the other moving, breathing, living things. And these just happen to be the things I've learned. And oh, by the way, that thing's not very good for me, so let's just kick that one out the door. And that one's not, but that one is really good for me, let's do that. I don't have the word to properly explain, but when I did the ketamine, for example, that is what I felt. I was like, that is all the stuff I've been doing forever. Like 99% of that is absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, okay, can I get rid of this one? I can't get rid of it. Now, when you come back into real life and you're not on drugs anymore, all that stuff starts to close in again, but maybe you've held on to 1% of what you've learned, and then you do something else like your breathing practice, your somatics, and that's another 1%. And that's the building I'm talking about towards this 99% of normalization or whatever. Now 99% is very optimistic, but even if you're 70%, but it's that process, that building, that journey, and things like that, and having people like you or your ayahuasca guide or your yoga teacher or your strength and conditioning coach who can help you understand that it's not about doing this because you're going to be the best of this, elite sports aside, whatever. It's about, this process is really important for you because here's how it's going to help you understand yourself and how to fix yourself. And if maybe it's not a very good business model for someone to be doing that, but if you're helping people, that's the most important thing for me. And if everybody was doing that, we wouldn't need business models anymore because we'd all be helping each other. But look, enough of that airy fairy pipe dream. But that it draws really, really deep similarities for me. Like, what's your understanding of the kind of psychedelic model or that model of the brain?
Well, I'm speaking from a place of ignorance because I've not done ketamine or ayahuasca or those things. I agree with what you're saying. Like the process of doing it looks to be that way. It's like you go on your journey and you've got a sort of a guide, someone there to help you, so you don't go nuts probably, or it's, you know, I think it's important to note though when we talk about psychedelics is that it's been going on for thousands of years, so like culturally it's massive.
Yeah.
Every single culture everywhere had some sort of shamanistic elements to it. Like, you know, the Celts did it, obviously South Americans did it, the Native American, the peyote, you know, everywhere. They all had it. So it's a shared heritage of everybody, which is another reason why it should absolutely be, you know, investigated as much as possible, I think. But I was going to say, yeah, in the context of how it was done in the past, like, you had to be, I think, isn't it, like, you didn't go to the shaman and just decide you're going to get mad out on a Tuesday.
No.
Not that you had Tuesdays because you didn't have a calendar.
Yeah. That's sorry, I'm just going to qualify what you're about to say. Really important, because you wouldn't send somebody who's never trained before to the gym to lift 500 kilos.
No.
You wouldn't send somebody who's never done a certain thing before or has no understanding. And again, this is not I'm not massively experienced either. Sounds like I'll do drugs. No, I literally just I tried that as it was a treatment we were offering, and I tried it.
Yeah.
But it's very, very important to understand that this is just another tool. But you're 100% right. That was a tool used by the but you had to qualify for it. You had to be invited to do it. They had to say you are ready for this experience, and a lot of people aren't ready.
Exactly, a lot of people aren't. It's like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
You know, and so it was part of your standing in the tribe, probably, to do this thing, or maybe you were going to become a shaman yourself. I don't know. I mean, so I think that's really important. Like, it's not for everyone. No, I don't think. I think if you're the sort of person who thinks you'd like to do it, you know, you're probably safe enough, because it's not something you're going to do on a whim, is it?
No. It's actually the same guy, Donnell. He's getting a lot of shouts out in this podcast. Now, you know Downey.
Oh yeah, Downey.
Yeah. So Downey explained this to me before, and again, not to say that Downey is mad into any doing psychedelics all the time, but he had a very, very good explanation for me when I asked him about this years ago. I read a book or something, and I was like, what is all this stuff about? He happened to be very well read on this, and he was explaining to me that the context of this is extremely important. Yeah. And there's obviously several different ways of doing drugs. And the most common way that people associate, and even people who listen to this, some people are going to say the same thing, like, it's getting out of your bleeding tree at a concert or something like that. Like that, there is a context of recreational drug use like that, but something like this, like what we're talking about, I'm talking about this in the same context, and Downey explained it to me in the same context as something like a breathing practice or a meditation, and it's like psychedelic use is not something that you want to I don't know if it's well enough understood in terms of long-term effects, but you don't want that to be your crutch. I have to take psychedelics to feel good, and that's not what we're talking about here. And how it was explained to me was to be in the right position for this means that you're ready to use the tool, and if you're ready to use the tool, it can offer you something in your life. But again, there's no magic bullet. It's not this magic mushroom. There you go, that you're going to take and it's going to fix your life. But if you're in a position where you're open to learning about yourself, and you're ready to learn about ways you can improve yourself, or you're ready to learn about why you might feel a certain way, then it can be very, very effective. And that's my understanding, and it's my experience of it as well. And I know for a fact, if I had gone into that experience with a different mindset and I wasn't open to it, or I fought it, or I resisted it, or I was just going in saying, well, I'm depressed and this is going to fix me, it's not going to work. And it doesn't work that way. But as a tool, and obviously they figured this out over thousands of years, as a tool to help you understand the greater purpose, and again, these phrases, the people who don't have these conversations regularly or involved in this kind of stuff regularly, this stuff sounds very cliched and the greater purpose and love everybody and all this kind of stuff. But when you actually dig into it and you apply it to real life, this stuff is genuinely so powerful. These thoughts, these conversations are powerful. And the psychedelic aspect of this, it's just an unlocking of a certain portion of your brain that we're forgetting how to use, and we've numbed that part of our brain, because it's not. I think the way I look at it is, if we had to deal with the lives that we deal with, and we were considering every single thing that happened, our heads would explode. We can't handle this level of input. Like, if every single picture I saw on Instagram, or every single thing the boss said, or every single comment made by a person was meant, and I absorbed that and I thought about it and I was considered, my head would explode, because like, a lot of it's absolute bullshit and it's toxic. So we don't learn to use that side of our brain. But once you start to tap into it, and again, you interrupt the feedback loop, but you interrupt the stimulus, and you give yourself that time to consider what you actually want to do, or what actually makes you happy. That's where I find this stuff really, really, I'm just fascinated, and I'm literally nicking the tip of the iceberg with my understanding of this stuff. Yeah. But I find it really, really fascinating, and as another another element of the conversation of daily practices or
daily ketamine use.
Daily ketamine use, yeah. But you know what I mean? Daily practice or practices that you can do to make you feel. And again, like the ideal situation would be you find this through something else. You find this through a breathing I've spoken to people who do breathing practices like the Wim Hof method and things like that, and they say similar things to me. They say similar things like I get to a place where I quiet my mind or the ego is dissolved or stuff like that. And it took me because I started to understand these concepts but had never experienced it, and it took that experience for me to realize that's real. And I haven't done it since now, but I've been looking for that. Feeling from other practices, from move, or even something so simple as sitting by myself for a minute or two and not doing anything, because you know that urge to pick up the phone, like that to me is really powerful, because I've such a what's the word I'm looking for here? Such potential for growth here, because I'm at one end of the scale here. The stimulus, go all the time. So even sitting for 2 minutes by myself is really powerful for me. So I'm trying to build my practices on that. Now I told you I'm doing my 5 to 10 minutes of somatics every evening, and I'm finding that it's good for the body, but it's great for the head. Because now I'm doing something for 10 minutes before I go to bed. It's just kind of totally pulling me back down off the rat race, the madness before I go to bed, which is great. So I'm sleeping a little bit better as well. All of a sudden, all these magic things are happening because you're doing small little practices.
So I'm glad you said that about when you do your somatic practice, your head calms down. Because, excuse me, I'm gonna read a little piece out of a book.
Please.
So. Yeah, because I noticed this as well when I started doing it as well. It wasn't, okay, my back feels better, but also I'm just super chill after I do this. It really quiets my mind. And that's common observation from people who develop the practice. And it's because, and I'll just read this direct, the neurophysiologist Roger W. Sperry has concluded that the sole product of brain function is muscular coordination. He has even refined this judgment by saying that the entire output of our thinking mechanism goes into the motor system.
Wow.
This is to say that when we think, we are either activating muscles or at the very least activating motor neurons. So the upshot of that is, if you quiet the muscles, if you relax the muscles, the mind tends to come down with it. Right? Because I've said this to loads of people, you learn to move before you learn to think. And people forget that.
That's true, yeah.
You learn to move before you learn to think. Babies, what do? What's the first thing you learn to do?
The first thing I learned to do, probably eat, not me.
Well, funny enough, that comes nobody has to learn how to suckle. That's automatic. It's already there.
Yeah.
So after that, what was the next thing you learned to do?
I'm going to say move, is it?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
First, what do babies learn? They learn how to roll over, crawl, walk.
Yeah.
That's it.
Swim.
And swim. And swim, yeah.
Throw them in a swimming pool, they're fine.
So.
Don't throw your baby in a swimming pool.
Unless you don't want to. Yeah. So the first thing you learn to do is orient yourself in your environment. And after that, then you start developing, cognitive skills. But only after you've learned how to, move around your environment. So I think that's overlooked. And it's overlooked, I think, because it's so obvious and it's so just taken for granted. But your mental faculties don't develop until after you've learned to walk in the normal development of a healthy human. So I just think that's an interesting thing to think about.
It is interesting, yeah. When you think about animals as well, like a horse is born and within an hour it's running around.
Yeah.
I'm sure it doesn't have a grasp at a greater purpose of life at an hour old, but it can run around. It can run away from a predator. Like,
I think he has a great grasp, man. He just sits in a field eating
grass
all day.
Yeah.
He's winning. Well, of course, you have to, because like if you birth a foal out in the savannah, if it can't walk straight away, it's not going to make it.
Yeah.
So there was probably a period where maybe they were being born and it took them a while to walk, and all those ones were eaten.
Yeah.
So just by way of that, what's the word you're looking for? Evolution takes it out of the system because it's not able to reproduce, right? So only the ones that are able to walk straight away are the ones that evolve. So first thing you learn to do is walk or is move.
Brilliant.
It's super important.
Yeah.
And use your hands. There's sort of an order to it. Kids will learn to walk, then they start using their hands, picking up everything. Then everything goes in the mouth. Yeah. Because they've no language to describe anything at this point. All they know is warm, cold, soft, hard, right? Because they've been suckling. Yeah. Whether it's on the bottle or on the breast. So that's why everything goes in the mouth. That's how they understand the world. Okay. Can I suck on this? Yeah. So you've a young kid. Yeah. So you probably remember this quite clearly.
I do. Yeah.
Everything going in the mouth. Because but then as they start to understand the world differently. As they get cognitive functions, they stop doing that because they have other ways to understand the world. They don't need to put everything in their mouth to figure out, you know, what is this or whether it's good for me or not. So you could actually look at the whole, and now, pet theory here, okay? This is just me rambling. You can look at a human development as almost a microcosm of all of human evolution, because it starts as just a couple of cells, then it becomes a fetus, then it comes out, or, you know, goes to full term, comes out, learns to move, learns to orient itself in its environment, learns to use its hands, and then eventually it learns to talk, which is exactly what we've done on a larger time scale as a species.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? It's almost like a little fractal of human evolution.
That's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, that could be absolute nonsense that I've just dreamed up, but it seems to fit.
It does fit, yeah, absolutely. And then we managed to fuck it all up, because I've been fascinated by this, watching my child Zoe now, and I've thought about this a lot. Someone said it to me, I don't know where I heard it years and years ago. It's, if you want to train well, watch what a child does. Yeah. They move and they eat and they sleep, and that's literally what, if you want to achieve a goal, that's what you have to do. You have to move, eat and sleep. It's a great gig, yeah. And when you watch, I watch her, if she's picking up something off the ground, the perfect squat form, absolutely perfect form. She's very, very mobile. She moves well relative to her body size. She's very, very strong, and she moves really well. And then we sit them down in chairs, and then we stop them moving, and then we focus them on learning for 7 or 8 hours a day, without moving, without doing what actually comes naturally to them.
Yeah.
And you see the difference in cultures where they don't have this same kind of, let's call it industrialized, I suppose, culture. When you look at some African cultures or Asian cultures where they're still squatting around fires when they're 90 and they've perfect hip mobility. There's no such thing as a hip replacement in Mongolia, like, because they're all in good condition because they've been doing. Now, obviously, there's other problems. I'm not suggesting me I'll just give up everything and go live in Mongolia, but in terms of human development, I've always been fascinated by it and been able to watch it over the last 2.5 years with Zoe as well. You really see how we were meant to be, and left without, I suppose, all the modern trimmings that we have now, all the creature comforts. Could we potentially be more mobile and happier, and it'd be a simpler life, fair enough. And again, I'm not suggesting we go and live in caves anymore, but there's lessons to be learned there, and maybe some stuff to be unlearned, like bad driving habits. Like, you can unlearn some bad driving habits, it makes you a better driver. Maybe we can unlearn some bad human habits, and that makes us, and that's again to this experience where you're able to remove and be the witness, and look at what are the things that I've learned that are bad habits for me, and who do I surround myself with that is bad for me, and do I need to remove some of that, and then re-implement some of the basic good habits. And what's a basic good habit? Movement. Basic movement patterns.
100%. Like, the defining characteristic, again, I know we have a million pet theories here. Defining characteristic of the universe is movement. No matter how, like, they go out into the cosmos, everything moves. Yeah. They go down into the microscopic world, quarks and quantum physics, everything moves. Yeah. Every time they think they're down to the last thing, they might find more, and it's all movement. Everything's moving. Yeah. So, you know, it's literally the fundamental characteristic of reality is that things move. Yeah. So if you have a part of your body that doesn't move, you're going against the universe.
Brilliant.
But you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
movement is fundamental to everything, because you can only perceive things that move.
Yeah,
like, you know, like
a T-Rex. Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
can't see if you don't move. Yeah.
If you like, I know sometimes maybe if I'm doing some work on the laptop and the window's there, and a bird flies by. Yeah. You immediately go to look at it.
Yeah, but you wouldn't have if the bird hadn't flown by,
because there's nothing to perceive. Yeah. But as soon as something changes, something moves, you go, oh, what's that?
Yeah.
Which is similar, you know, happens when you do your pandiculation. You contract and you go, oh, what's that?
What's that?
Your brain goes, something's changed.
Yeah.
Changes the tension. But you've done it, so you're aware of it. So
well, I've done it, and like I said, it's hard for people to understand, but like, try these movements.
No, I don't mean you, Danny, you've done it. I mean,
you personally have done it. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's coming from the proverbial you.
Yeah.
You know,
you've got the power.
It's self-initiated.
Yeah.
You know.
Look, we're gone over 90 minutes there. We're flying through this. Yeah, absolutely. So that's just that's a nice way to kind of close it out there. We started with somatics. We brought it back to moving as well. So look, experience tells me we could have gone on for another 4 or 5 hours there. So we'll definitely have to have you back, Colin, for another conversation if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries, man.
But that has been, even for me who's been doing somatics for a while and I've known you a long time, every time we talk about it, I learn more, and I learn more that I can put into context, more that I can put into practice in my own life, which is why I do this. As I said to you before, it's very selfish for me doing this podcast. I want to learn more, and if somebody else learns from doing this, brilliant, but like I want to learn more. That's the whole point. But it's been very
Totally.
educational and really enjoyable. If anybody wants to come and see you or even have a chat with you again, because I know you like chatting about this stuff with people as well. If people want to learn from you, if they want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Best to jump on my website, learnsomatics.ie.
Okay.
LearnSomatics.ie. There's a contact form there. You can get me. I am on LinkedIn as well. I think if you go Learn Somatics on LinkedIn, you'll get me, and on Facebook. I'm not a mad user of Facebook, so you're probably better to just jump on the website. You can get me there. And my phone number's up there. I'm not going to print it out. It's there if anyone wants to get in touch. If you, if you have a chronic pain issue that you're looking for help with that you haven't had any joy with the traditional methods, consider somatics for sure. Because if the problem is chronic tension, it'll help.
Okay.
If it's ripped, torn, or broken, you got to get that looked at first, obviously. But beyond that, no, it's really helpful. And also for stress management as well, as we were talking about earlier. If you're looking for something that can help you, as Danny alluded to there, sleep better. Just empty that bucket at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And empty that bucket, man. It's all about that bucket. But or if you just want to ask a question, I'm more than happy to interact with people, whether it's ring the phone or send an email or whatever. It's cool. Lovely stuff. And I know you brought a few books along the way as well. Didn't even get to.
Yeah, I am gonna throw the links up in the description of the podcast as well, because a lot of the stuff we talked about and a lot of the concepts we pull out of these books too, and these kind of resources. So I'll include all that kind of stuff for people who actually want to have a read themselves. But look, Colin, really appreciate your time. It's a pleasure as always to have you in. It's a pleasure to chat to you. Thanks very much for that conversation, and we'll chat to you again soon.
No worries, Danny. I really appreciate the platform. So cheers, man. It was enjoyable.
No problem. And there it is. A long one today, guys, but a great chat. If you'd like to get in contact with myself or the Prymal team, you can just head over to www.prymal.ie/Colm Mc Donnell for all the links, show notes, and contact details. And guys, if you enjoyed the show and you want to hear more, give us a follow at Prymal Pro, Prymal Pro, on Instagram and Facebook. We're also on Twitter at Prymal P, Prymalp, and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And guys, if you do enjoy this show, please do show your support by popping over and giving us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. It does really help us out. And don't forget, there is a 20% discount to any listeners of the podcast for a 1-to-1 online movement session with Colin at Learn Somatics. Just use the code PRYMALSOMA, PRYMALSOMA, when you're booking the appointment. Cheers all, and I'll see you soon.